Well, we've got a couple studies coming out now by scientists who have been looking over and studying the Wu flu, or the Uwu flu, or the Wuhan Coronavirus, as the media likes to call it. And the first one is actually out of China, and you would think that a study coming out of China would be, pretty tame and try and make this look not so bad and say, oh, this is something that the government can easily manage. And well, I mean, they are saying that it's possible that the government could manage this. They do, try to be optimistic, but their findings are still pretty darn scary, even given that. And so it turns out that according to this study, and this is not peer reviewed yet, nothing that you're going to get on this virus now is going to have been peer reviewed. It's way too early. Peer review is a process that takes time. But given the data that they have, and they're using Chinese government data, they're not estimating that the Chinese government is lying or anything like that. They're taking all the Chinese government at face value, and they're calculating that the infection rate of this virus is about a 4. It has an R naught of 4. And what that means, because I'm not a biologist, I don't know what their different terms are, the statistical terms that they use to study epidemics and things like that. But apparently, the R naught number is how many people on average an infected person will spread the virus to. So if you have an R naught of 1, that means that you're going to spread it to one person. But this one has an R naught of 4, which means every person is going to spread it to 4 other people on average. And this is much higher than other common diseases. The common influenza, which the media just loves to keep comparing to the Wu flu and say, oh, look, common flu kills so many more people than the Wu flu. Well, that only has an R naught of something like 1.28. So the common influenza, even though it's everywhere, doesn't spread very fast. And so the Wu flu, we understand now why the numbers of cases, even the official numbers, are spiking so high so quickly, much faster than SARS did. The Wu flu has, if it hasn't already exactly surpassed SARS, it's about to surpass it. Probably will have surpassed it by the time that you are listening to this recording. But if you look at the chart, the time series chart for SARS, the infections had already begun to taper off at this point, whereas the Wu flu is continuing on unabated. It's growing exponentially. It is certifiably parabolic. Now, by comparison, SARS had an R naught of something like 3, I think. It was above, say where the common flu or the Spanish flu was, but below where the Wu flu is. The Wu flu is spreading, at a much higher rate than any of those outbreaks. And in fact, something pretty ironic, people keep bringing up the movie Contagion, which I've never seen, and I'm not a big fan of Hollywood movies, but that, Hollywood tends to exaggerate quite a bit. They make things that all seem so bad, and apparently in that movie they even, I guess, were considering nuking a city to try and contain the outbreak. Well, in that movie, the R naught of the virus was only something like 3.5. Which, if this study is true, that would mean that the Wu flu is worse than the virus in Contagion. Now, by worse, I just mean that it's going to spread faster. I think that probably a big problem with trying to stop the spread of the Wu flu is not just how fast how easy it is to spread to other people, but the fact that so many people are not going to be that debilitated by it and are maybe not even going to present symptoms. And because of this, you're going to have people who are carrying the Wu flu, walking around, going about their daily life like nothing's happened, giving this virus to all sorts of different people who, may or may not become gravely ill. And so other than pulling a plug on your entire economy, which China seems to have done in certain parts of the country, I don't see how you contain this. And that's why probably we're seeing, even though it's a small sample size, the rate of cases is going up faster outside of China than inside China. In fact, the rate of growth for cases is actually the lowest in Wuhan, because the quarantine is having a bit of an effect. When you get everyone off the streets, when you get people to stop walking around in those tightly packed sidewalks and driving around and interacting with other people, and you just empty out the streets and tell everyone stay home for a few days, well then, new people aren't going to contract the virus as much. But for the rest of the world, it's just not practical to completely shut down the global economy. It's not even practical for China to shut down their entire domestic economy. And because of that, organizations like the World Health Organization and other governments around the world seem to be a little slow to act because they do not want to stifle international trade or anything like that. Which means that any severe draconian measures won't be taken until it's too late. No, I'm not saying that I'm in favor of what China's doing. I would be scared to death. And I certainly wouldn't want to be in Wuhan or one of these other cities that's been quarantined, or where the government comes in and walls you in. I never took it too seriously when old Ron Paul used to say, hey, you guys always talk about wanting to build a wall, but one day that wall might be used to keep you in. Well, when you see what's going on in China, I kind of see what he meant by that. And so for now, I think that the place to watch, the Wu flu next is not really in China, because whatever it does in China, it's going to do in China. I'm much more interested in what happens outside of China, where pretty much nothing is being done to contain the virus. I'm interested to see how fast cases can grow outside of China. How long before, we have, confirmed cases in the United States in the triple digits? Now, right now, I believe we're still in the single digits, thankfully. But it's going to take time for all these people who, came from China and walked around in the streets of America for a few days to see how many people they infected and then how many people those people infected. Again, when you have the R naught being so high, from what I understand, it makes it very, very easy for this thing to spread. And the likelihood that there are plenty of people out there in the wilderness who are carrying this that we don't know about in America seems pretty true. Now, on to the second study that came out today, which has also not been peer-reviewed yet, because, like I said, those things take time. So that means that this, there might be holes in this. I'm not a biologist or an epidemiologist, so I can't really look at at these studies and tell you whether or not it's good scholarship. That is something that other scientists who have read these papers before and understand the math and things behind it, they'll have to come to those conclusions. But what this paper essentially has to say is it's published by some scientists in India, and they found a sequence in the genome, which just for those of you who don't remember high school biology, I believe viruses do not have DNA; they only have RNA. I believe that's part of the reason why viruses are not considered living beings. And so anyway, there's a little sequence on this genome, I guess about 4 genes, they were saying, that do not appear in any other coronavirus strain. Because they mapped out the genome of the Wu flu and then compared it against it. I guess they had 55 other coronavirus strains that they were able to judge this against, and these 4 genes, which were in a sequence, stood out as not existing in any of the other samples. But yet it was present in all the samples of the Wu flu that they had that had been taken from humans. Now, apparently, there were samples of Wu flu taken from bats that did not have this sequence, interestingly enough. And so after they were unable to identify this, sequence, these genes as being, associated with the coronavirus family, they decided to, check it in their system against all other viruses that they have records of, that they have mapped out. And what do you know? They had a 100% match with none other than HIV. And so how about that? How would you like a side of AIDS with your Wu flu, Mr. Boo? And this certainly adds to the credibility of the claim that the Wu flu is in fact a bioweapon that was engineered by scientists in Wuhan at the one of the 2 high-level biolabs that they have there, facilities that are rumored to be bioweapons research centers. It looks like they took SARS and the HIV and put them in a blender to try and make something that was even worse than either of those viruses. Now, apparently, these genes have to do with how the virus bonds to the host cell. So perhaps they were trying to take something from HIV. Maybe HIV it was better at bonding to host cells, once in the bloodstream than than SARS or whatever they were working with as a base. And so you would use this part of HIV to try and make this one more infectious to get your R naught up because remember what I said, this virus has an R naught, according to these preliminary studies, higher than that of SARS. So it is more infectious, it's easier to spread. This may be as a result of this genetic modification. And that, to me, is, just another reason. If it does turn out, in fact, that this was specifically engineered to kill human beings, well, then we should be very afraid. Because, according to the Indian scientists, it was absurdly unlikely that the virus randomly mutated in a way to get these 4 genes, which are identical to that of HIV. It seems, almost certain in their eyes, from what I understand, the way that biology works, that this would have to be spliced in from HIV. Now, of course, like I said, this has to do with the cell binding. This is not to do with HIV itself. So I don't think Wu flu is going to give you AIDS. Nobody has said that. And so this, I think, is perhaps one of the most interesting pieces of news that has come out about the Wu flu. And I'm very interested to see when other scientists get a look at this, if they come to the same conclusion. Because if there is a scientific consensus around the world that the Wu flu has a section of the HIV genome spliced into it, well, then I think it would become almost certain that everyone in the world would have to recognize that China engineered this as a bioweapon. Now, the one detail that's still keeping me from accepting that this is in fact a bioweapon is that I can't see the Chinese being dumb enough to create a bioweapon like this and not also create a vaccine for it. Perhaps this virus was still in development, and that's why they hadn't gotten to a vaccine. But I mean, why would you create some kind of weapon of mass destruction like this and not have any sort of kill switch for it, not some kind of failsafe? I mean, you can say that, oh, well, the Chinese government just doesn't care about human lives. And it's like, well, that might be true. But I mean, still, what if they themselves, become infected with the virus? You don't want to just create this monster and let it run loose. You want to be able to have some way of controlling it. So I still don't understand why, if this is in fact created in a lab, why they wouldn't already have a vaccine for it long before it ever got out. Unless, like I said, this was somehow leaked and accidentally released into the world during development while they were still working on, making this even more dangerous and weaponizing it further. If this was, in fact, some kind of prototype, then it would make a little more sense that they wouldn't yet have a vaccine for it. So I know I said I wouldn't do Wu flu update videos every day, but these two reports that came out today were just too important, and I couldn't pass it up. I mean, this is, I think, the two biggest and most shocking, perhaps not shocking, but the scariest bits of news to come out about this virus so far, that it is incredibly infectious, more infectious than SARS, and also that it is related to HIV in some way. So if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. If you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.